The vows of karma. Vanessa, a demanding and image-obsessed bride, is convinced that her bridesmaids are jealous of her and plotting to steal her fiancé, David, a man she met online and quickly fell for. Unknown to her, she is about to face the ultimate reckoning for a dark secret from her past. Vanessa was obsessed with perfection. Every detail of her wedding had to be flawless, down to the colors of the napkins and the precise arrangement of flowers. Her bridesmaids, Stacy, Tina, and Joyce, had grown used to her constant demands and tantrums, but in the weeks leading up to the wedding, Vanessa's behavior had escalated to new extremes. "Stacy, I saw you looking at David's picture," Vanessa snapped during one of their many wedding planning sessions. "Don't think I don't know what's going on. You've always been jealous of me." Stacy's eyes widened in disbelief. "Vanessa, what are you talking about? I'm happy for you." "Happy?" Vanessa scoffed, folding her arms. "Yeah, right. You're just pretending. All of you are. I know you all want him." Her paranoia had taken root the moment she got engaged to David. They had met online, and their whirlwind romance quickly led to a proposal. Though Vanessa had never met David in person before the engagement, she was captivated by his charm, his looks, and his seemingly perfect life. The wedding was planned hastily, and Vanessa had ignored all the red flags. She was desperate to live out the fairy tale she had always dreamed of. As the wedding day grew closer, Vanessa's paranoia worsened. She watched her bridesmaids like a hawk, convinced they were plotting against her. Every time they smiled at her, she interpreted it as smugness, as if they were mocking her behind her back. At her bachelorette party, Vanessa's anger bubbled over. When Tina complimented David on how lucky he was to have Vanessa, she lost it. "Don't you dare talk about my fiancé like that," Vanessa shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "I see what you're trying to do, Tina. You want him for yourself." The room fell silent as her bridesmaids exchanged nervous glances. Tina looked wounded, trying to calm Vanessa down, but it was too late. "You all think I don't notice, but I do," Vanessa hissed. "You're all jealous of me. You always have been. I'm finally getting the life I deserve, and you can't stand it." Her words hung in the air, thick with accusation. The bridesmaids left soon after, hurt and confused. Vanessa was left alone, fuming and pacing, convinced that they were the enemy. The morning of the wedding, Vanessa stood in front of the mirror in her luxurious white gown, admiring herself. But even as she took in the sight of her perfectly curled hair and flawless makeup, a nagging sense of unease crept in. Where were her bridesmaids? They had been uncharacteristically quiet since the bachelorette party. "They probably couldn't stand to see me this happy," Vanessa muttered under her breath. She checked her phone. David hadn't sent any messages yet, either. He was supposed to be at the venue by now. She dismissed the thought, telling herself he was simply busy getting ready. Finally, the time came for her to walk down the aisle. The ceremony was being held in an extravagant garden, the flowers in full bloom, the sun shining brilliantly. Everything was set. But as she made her way to the altar, Vanessa's heart raced with anticipation and a strange, unsettling feeling she couldn't quite place. When she reached the end of the aisle, she expected to see the tall, handsome man she had fallen in love with online. But instead, David was sitting in a wheelchair. Vanessa froze, her eyes widening in shock. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, trying to process what she was seeing. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "David, why didn't you tell me?" David looked up at her, his face calm but with a sadness in his eyes. "I wanted to, Vanessa," he said softly. "But I wasn't sure how you would react." Vanessa's mind raced. How could this be happening? She had been so sure she was marrying the perfect man. How could he have hidden this from her? But then, as she looked closer at him, something familiar began to creep into her mind. His face, the way his hands gripped the wheelchair. A memory, long buried, resurfaced, clawing its way to the front of her mind. Years ago, on a rainy night, Vanessa had been driving recklessly after a party. She had been young, impulsive, and slightly tipsy. She hadn't seen the man crossing the street until it was too late. The car struck him, and in her panic, she had driven away, leaving the scene without looking back. She had told no one. The guilt had gnawed at her, but she had buried it deep, telling herself it was just an accident, a mistake she could forget. But now, standing at the altar, staring at David, it all came rushing back. She gasped, her legs trembling beneath her. "No," she whispered, stepping back. "It can't be." David's eyes were filled with quiet understanding. "It was you, Vanessa," he said softly. "I recognized you the moment we started talking online, but I wanted you to see me for who I am now, not what happened then." Vanessa's mind reeled. The man she had hit and left crippled all those years ago was the same man she had fallen in love with online, the same man she was about to marry. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes as the weight of her actions crushed her. She had spent years chasing perfection, controlling every aspect of her life, convinced that everyone around her was out to get her. But in the end, it wasn't her bridesmaids who were plotting against her. It was her own past, coming back to claim its due. "I didn't know," she sobbed, backing away from David's wheelchair. "I didn't know it was you. I was young, scared. I didn't mean to." David nodded, his voice calm but firm. "I forgave you a long time ago, Vanessa. But I couldn't marry you without you knowing the truth. Karma has a way of finding us, doesn't it?" Vanessa collapsed to the ground, her once flawless white gown now rumpled and dirty. The reality of her actions, both then and now, crashed over her in waves. She had hurt people, pushed them away, and built her life on illusions. And now, she had to face the consequences. The guests whispered in confusion, not understanding the depth of what was happening. Vanessa's bridesmaids, standing at the side, exchanged looks of concern but didn't move to comfort her. They had seen the worst of her, and now, so had she. In the days that followed, Vanessa cancelled the wedding and withdrew into herself. She realized how much her anger, her need for control, and her distrust of others had poisoned her life. She had been so consumed by her paranoia that she hadn't noticed the good things right in front of her. As for David, he didn't hold a grudge. He had already made peace with the past, but he knew that marrying Vanessa under the weight of such a secret would have been a mistake. Their love, born from lies and half-truths, couldn't survive without the foundation of honesty. Vanessa spent weeks reflecting on her choices, on the way she had treated those around her, and most of all, on the man she had hurt so many years ago. She knew now that she couldn't run from her past anymore. The pain she had caused had come full circle, and she was left with the bitter taste of regret. And yet, there was a strange sense of relief in finally facing the truth. Karma had caught up with her, and now, she could no longer hide. For the first time in her life, Vanessa understood that perfection wasn't about control or appearances, it was about accepting who she was, flaws and all, and learning to live with the consequences of her actions. She reported herself to the police station and she paid for her crimes.